Ancient rituals. The many things our ancestors did to please the gods or bring prosperity to their homelands. Looking back, it's amazing just how different some people's views were about what was considered normal or even honorable. From the human sacrifices of the Aztecs to the flesh-eating traditions of the Yanomami people, what we may now see as unthinkable or wicked was once seen as a blessing. That's what makes history so interesting to learn, in my opinion, so I'm really excited to get through this iceberg. Let's dive into it now with the first entry of Tier 1, Aztec Human Sacrifice. So you already know we had to kick this off with arguably the most well-known ancient ritual being the Aztec human sacrifices. Because there are a bunch of interesting details, this entry is gonna be a bit long, but it's definitely worth it. So at the core of it all was the conviction that human sacrifices were key to keeping the gods happy and making sure the sun did its daily job across the sky, the earth stayed fertile, and everything in the universe remained in harmony. One of their most detailed ceremonies was dedicated to the god Tezcatlipoca, associated with the night sky and required a particularly meaningful sacrifice. Basically, every year, a young man who embodied the physical perfection and virtues that Tezcatlipoca was associated with was chosen to live as the earthly embodiment of the deity. During the year, he would be treated with great respect, wearing fine clothes and jewelry, and allowed to indulge in earthly pleasures like being given a female entourage and such. But he accepted the understanding that at the end of the year he would willingly participate in his own sacrifice, considering it to be a great honor. It was also common for people in other sacrifices to go willingly to the altar, since it was seen as guaranteeing someone a blessed afterlife. The go-to method for these sacrifices was pretty intense though, being heart extraction. Whether it was prisoners of war or people picked for what they symbolized, they were brought up the temple steps, laid out on a stone, and waited for it to happen. A priest would cut into the chest with a flint knife and pull out the heart while it was still beating, all in the name of divine offerings. There were even methods where the victim would be thrown in fire repeatedly and then have their heart removed, or be shot in the heart with arrows. The Templo Mayor, which is in the heart of Tenochtitlan, which is the Aztec capital, was the primary location for many of these sacrifices. This temple was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc, and was the spiritual center of the Aztec world. The twin temples at the top were where numerous sacrifices took place because the Aztecs believed that this was where the divine and mortal worlds met. The rituals performed by priests on these temples, often in front of large crowds, emphasized the communal aspect of these rites. The aftermath of these rituals is also something I wanted to add, since it basically involved the elites consuming the flesh and displaying the skulls on racks. So yeah, you can see how there's a bunch to all of this, and to be honest, there's so much more to learn and things I'd want to add more here, but I don't want to make it too long, so yeah, we'll move on to the next entry. But if you have any more information to add in the comments, I'd love to hear more about it. Ancient Egyptian Mummification. The ancient Egyptian mummification was all about getting ready for what comes next after this life. They really believed in an afterlife, so they went all out to keep the body in tip-top shape for their eternal journey. This wasn't a quick fix too, it was a 70-day labor of love, starting with a thorough wash and then moving on to taking out the organs. They handled these with care, sometimes putting them back after some TLC, but always making sure that the heart stayed put because it was the key to emotions and smarts. The brain though, not so much, so they'd pull it out through the nose. Natron, which is a super salt from nature, was what they used to draw out the body, keeping it from decaying and making sure it lasted forever. They'd leave the body covered in it for about 70 days, and after the body was all dried up, it got a final rinse before being wrapped in linen, with special amulets and charms for protection in the next world. They'd even use resin on the wraps to keep moisture and bugs out. This whole process was a big deal, especially for the VIPs of ancient Egypt, who could basically afford the most elaborate mummification, complete with special jars for their organs and super fancy coffins. Greek Olympic Games. The ancient Olympic Games, which started in 776 BC in Olympia, were held in honor of Zeus and blended athletic prowess with Greek mythology and religion. Initially part of a religious festival, these games became a cornerstone of Greek culture, uniting city-states from across the Hellenic world. Athletes competed in various events including running, wrestling, and chariot racing, strictly adhering to the rules that demanded at least 10 months of training. The prize for victors was usually olive wreaths symbolizing peace and honor, which was a tradition reflecting the game's sacred origins attributed to Hercules planting the sacred olive tree. Participation was also only exclusive to freeborn Greek men, so slaves couldn't participate. Despite their eventual end in 393 AD under Emperor Theodosius I, The games left a lasting legacy, influencing modern sporting competitions and embodying the ancient Greeks' values of honor, glory, and respect for the divine. Alright, now its counterpart, Roman gladiator games. The Roman gladiator games, which were rooted in funeral rites, evolved from private family ceremonies to grand public spectacles under Julius Caesar. Contrary to popular belief too though, not all fights were to the death, with some contestants following strict rules and ending in stalemates to avoid unnecessary loss of expensive gladiators. The thumbs down gesture, commonly associated with death in the arena, may actually have signaled mercy too. Gladiators were divided into classes based on skills and fought in specialized styles, rarely against animals, which were reserved. Women also participated in the games too, and some gladiators formed unions to ensure proper funeral rites for fallen comrades. Emperors seeking popularity occasionally entered the arena too, and successful gladiators enjoyed celebrity status, becoming early endorsements and even sex symbols. Norse Viking burials. Viking funerals were very important and included rituals that reflected their beliefs about the afterlife and social status. They had the option of either being cremated in a grand funeral pyre or being buried. Cremation was seen as a way for the smoke to carry them into the afterlife, and their ashes might then be placed in an urn. Burials were different though, with the deceased being placed with their possessions in wooden chambers, wagons, or even entire boats or ships, which were marked with stones or mounds, some shaped like ships. The Vikings had different afterlife destinations too, such as the Valhalla for heroic warriors, Folkvangar for others, and less favorable places too, like Helheim for those who died less heroically. The more valuable possessions that were buried with you reflected your accomplishments in life. The highest honor was a ship burial, where the deceased and their belongings were placed in a ship as a sign of respect and a smooth journey to the next life. However, it was rare for these ships to set adrift due to the high cost of making them. Funeral customs varied too, with the body dressed in new clothes and possibly undergoing a lot of cleaning rituals. The wealthier Vikings received the most extravagant send-offs. Too, which sometimes included slaves volunteering to join their masters in death. These funerals were also occasions for people to gather, feast, and celebrate the life of the deceased. Ibn Fadlan, a traveler from the 10th century, once described a Viking funeral he witnessed, which gave us some pretty cool first-hand insight to the importance of these ship burials and the treasures they contained. Celtic Druid rituals. Celtic Druid rituals were complex ceremonies that took place in natural areas, like groves, springs, and lakes. These locations were seen as connections between the physical world and the supernatural realm. The rituals were synchronized with astronomical events, like the phases of the moon, and involved prayers, incantations, and offerings to the gods. People would offer things like food, precious items, and pottery, and in times of crisis, animals, and sometimes even humans, would be sacrificed. Druids played a central role in these rituals, acting as intermediates between humans and the gods. They were well knowledgeable in astronomy, calendars, and natural medicine, and also took on tasks like teaching and legal matters. Prophecy was also an important aspect of Druid practices, often through observing nature or examining sacrificial remains. The arrival of the Romans and the spread of Christianity brought significant changes to Celtic religion and Druidic practices. The Romans tried to suppress Druidism because of practices like human sacrifice, but the rise of Christianity posed an even bigger threat to them. However, in more recent times, there has been a revival of Druidism, especially among neo-pagan groups who want to reconnect and recreate ancient Celtic practices. Chinese ancestor worship. Chinese ancestor worship has been a long-standing tradition in China since ancient times. It's deeply ingrained in Chinese culture and revolves around the belief that the spirits of ancestors have a direct influence on the well-being and luck of their living descendants. To gain protection and blessings for prosperity, families perform rituals and make offerings to honor their ancestors. This practice is rooted in the concept of filial piety, which is highly valued by Confucius and considered essential for the nation. The idea is that if ancestors are treated well in the afterlife, they will look good upon their descendants, while neglecting them could lead to misfortune. Rituals often involve offering food before meals, following the tradition of allowing ancestors to eat first as a sign of respect, which is essentially like treating the deceased as if they're still part of the living. How ancestor worship is practiced can vary across China though, with the South emphasizing strong family ties and equal access to family resources, while the North focuses more on communal deity worship. Mourning practices also play a significant role, with customs such as wearing simple clothing and adhering to a restricted diet during the mourning period, which traditionally lasts up to 3 years. Funerals are also really important since they serve to honor the deceased, protect descendants from malevolent spirits, and ensure the soul's journey to the afterlife. These ceremonies can be elaborate, especially for those of higher social status, and involve public displays of grief, cleansing rituals for the body, and offerings of food and incense. Because of the importance of proper observance, preparations for burials can be quite lengthy too. Biblical animal sacrifice. Biblical animal sacrifices, known as korbanot, were central to religious practices of ancient Israel, serving to bring people closer to God. These sacrifices, detailed extensively in the Torah, particularly in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, were conducted by a group of priests known as the Kohanim. The purpose of these sacrifices was multifaceted too. They were meant to atone for sins, express devotion, and maintain a close relationship with the divine. The sacrifice included animals, grain, and money, with animals being killed, grain burned, and money donated. This practice was seen as a way to bridge the gap between humanity and God, drawing the faithful closer to the divine presence. The Old Testament mandated animal sacrifices too, to provide a temporary covering for sins and foreshadow the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of sins. The requirement for animal sacrifices stemmed from the belief that without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness, as quoted from Hebrews 9:22. This system emphasized the seriousness of sin and the need for a sacrificial offering to make amends. Animal sacrifices were seen as a temporary solution though, until Jesus Christ came, whose death represented the perfect and final sacrifice. The act of sacrificing animals was also symbolic, teaching about the gravity of sin and the cost of making things right. These sacrifices remind the people of the consequences of sin and the need to reconcile with God. However, things changed later on though, because it became evident over time that animal blood could not completely cleanse humanity's sins, highlighting the need for a greater and more perfect sacrifice, which Jesus Christ fulfilled. His sacrifice made animal sacrifices unnecessary, as his death provided complete atonement for sin and allowed direct access to God without the need for any more offerings. Sati. Sati, also known as Suti, was an ancient custom in India where a widow would sacrifice herself by sitting on her deceased husband's funeral pyre. This practice was associated with Hindu traditions and is believed to originate from the warrior aristocracy in northern India. There's much debate about the origin of sati too, with some claiming it is mentioned in early Hindu scriptures, while others view it as a cultural tradition without religious mandate. Sati was not commonly practiced too though, but it was seen as an ideal of feminine devotion in certain Brahmin and royal castes. Historical records, including Greek sources from around 300 BCE, mention isolated cases of sati. The name Sati comes from goddess Sati, who was the wife of Shiva and immolated herself in protest against her father mistreating her husband. Throughout history, different rulers and colonial powers in India tried to ban the practice of sati. The well-known Emperor Akbar from the Mughal dynasty outlawed it in 1582, and later, during British colonial rule, Governor-General Lord William Bentinck officially banned it in 1829 with the Bengal Sati regulation. Despite these efforts though, there were still occasional incidents of sati, reflecting the complicated relationship between tradition, religion, and the law. Sati was heavily criticized for its violent treatment of women and was seen as a symbol of the patriarchal oppression of widows. In modern India, sati is illegal now and condemned. However, it remains a powerful symbol of past injustices and a reminder of ongoing struggle for women's rights. Maya ball game. The ancient Maya ball game, known as Pokatok, was not just a sport but also a crucial part of Maya culture. It had religious, social, and political significance and dates back over 3,500 years. It's one of the earliest team sports we actually know about. The game was played throughout Mesoamerica with some variations, but the core rules remained consistent. Players had to keep a solid rubber ball in motion using their knees, hips, and elbows instead of their hands or feet. The game took place in massive ball courts located in the heart of the cities, highlighting its importance in Maya society. The ball itself was heavy too, made of solid rubber and could weigh up to 8 or 9 pounds. Being hit by a ball could also cause serious injuries, so players wore protective gear like yokes and elaborate headdresses. However, Pokatok was not just a precursor to soccer or basketball. It held spiritual significance for the Maya and was connected to their gods and creation stories. This connection was not just symbolic but also literal, as the games represented the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, as well as maintaining the cosmic balance. Sometimes these games had more than just recreational purposes. They could resolve disputes and even replace actual battles. The games could become intense, and ceremonies surrounding them could involve human sacrifices too, especially for the losers or prisoners of war. All these rituals basically aim to please the gods and maintain order in the universe, which is a lot like the Aztecs. Ancient Olympic Truce. The Olympic Truce is an ancient tradition that began in Greece. It was created to ensure the safety of athletes and spectators traveling to the Olympic Games. The tradition started in the 9th century BC when three kings, Iphitos of Elis, Cleosthenes of Pisa, and Lygarchus of Sparta signed a treaty. This treaty protected the city of Olympia from attacks and allowed people to travel to and from the games without any trouble. Contrary to popular belief too, the truce did not stop wars between Greek states during the games or the truce period. Its main purpose was instead to keep participants and spectators safe and secure. This shows how important the games were in promoting peace among city-states that often fought each other. In present time though, the Olympic truce has been revived to promote peace, resolve conflicts, and encourage international cooperation through sports. The United Nations supports this initiative and urges member states to respect the truce and find peaceful solutions to their disputes. In 2012, during the London Olympic Games, the United Kingdom took a leading role in promoting the ideals of the Olympic truce. It became the first ever host nation to have all 193 UN members sign the Olympic Truce Resolution. This was a significant moment in history and aimed to create a peaceful and better world through sports and the Olympic spirit. Alright, moving on to tier 2, Samurai Seppuku. Seppuku, also known widely by its less formal term harakiri, is a form of ritual self-immolation that was originally reserved for the samurai, Japanese ancient warrior class. This act involves self-disembowelment, followed by decapitation by an appointed assistant, known as gaishakunen. The practice emerged as a way for samurai to die with honor, rather than fall into enemies' hands or live in disgrace. Over time, it evolved into a means of atonement or protest and was sometimes mandated by feudal lords or even chosen voluntarily by disgraced warriors to preserve their honor or that of their family. The first actual recorded act of seppuku was performed by Minamoto no Yurimasa during the Battle of Uji in 1180. The ritual held great importance in the samurai code of Bushido, which valued bravery, honor, and loyalty. The seppuku ceremony was highly ceremonial too, involving steps like bathing, wearing a white kimono, and writing a death poem. The act itself was seen as a final display of a samurai's bravery, determination, and commitment to the Bushido code. Seppuku wasn't actually limited to men only too though. Women affiliated with the samurai class also had a form of it known as jigai, which involved cutting the throat to avoid capture or dishonor by enemies. This practice illustrates how the influence of the Bushido code extended beyond the battlefield and impacted ideas about family honor and societal expectations. Vedic fire sacrifices. Vedic fire sacrifices, also known as yajna, are an integral part of Hindu tradition in India. These rituals, which date back to ancient times, are extensively described in ancient scriptures like the Brahmas and Yajurveda. They involve offerings to the gods in front of a sacred fire, symbolizing devotion, worship, and sacrifice. These rituals hold great importance in religious, spiritual, and social aspects of Hinduism, as they reflect a deep connection with the divine through the presence of fire, known as Agni. The yajna rituals are complex too, requiring careful preparations, offering of various items, and the recitation of sacred chants, all intended to please the deities and seek their blessings. The sacred fire named Agni plays a central role in these rituals, as it's believed to be a pathway through which the offerings reach the gods. These ceremonies serve as a spiritual exchange, where offerings are made to the gods, expecting divine favors and blessings in return. The first yajna, which is known as Sarvahat, symbolized the cosmic sacrifice of the divine being that transforms into the universe. This concept is also explained in the ancient Vedic hymn Purusha Sukta. It represents the idea that creation is an act of self-offering by the divine, laying the foundation for subsequent yajna practices that emphasize the cyclical nature of sacrifice and creation. The performance of yajna also includes different types of sacrifices, such as offerings of cooked and uncooked foods, as well as Sama rituals dedicated to celestial gods. Roman Lupercalia Festival. The Roman Lupercalia Festival, which took place on February 15th, was a unique celebration that involved various ancient rituals aimed at promoting health, fertility, and purifying the city. This festival had deep roots going all the way back to the 6th century BC and may have been connected to the myth of Rome's founders being raised by a she-wolf. The festivities began with a special group of priests known as the Luperci, sacrificing goats and a dog to the gods. It wasn't your usual ceremony though, as some different practices took place, such as the Luperci running around partially dressed and lightly whipping women in the crowd with thongs made from sacrificed goats, all in the belief that it would enhance fertility. Despite its pagan origins, some believe Lupercalia influenced modern celebrations like Valentine's Day, which is coming up or probably already passed by the time this video is up, with similarities drawn in their focus of love and relationships. However, in the 5th century, Christian leaders wanted to distance themselves from these traditions, leading Pope Gelasius I to ban the festival and possibly laying the groundwork for St. Valentine's Day, but the exact connection between Valentine's Day and Lupercalia still remains unclear. Spartan Agage. The Spartan Agage was a rigorous and defining feature of ancient Spartan society, essentially molding boys into the renowned warriors that showed Sparta's military might. Starting at the age of 7, Spartan boys were enrolled in this state-run education and training program, undergoing a transformation that was both physical and ideological, aimed at perfecting the art of warfare and instilling unwavering loyalty to Sparta. The Agage was divided into stages too, beginning with the Paids from ages 7 to 14, where boys learned the basics alongside endurance tests like stealing food, seen not as a crime unless caught. This phase also introduced them to the Spartan principle of laconism, teaching them to speak in a concise and impactful manner. After that, from ages 15 to 19, the focus shifted towards more intense military training and social integration, often under the guidance of an older mentor in a relationship aimed at solidifying discipline and martial skills. The final stage, which was called Habontes, spanned from 20 to 29 years, culminating in full military service and citizenship rights. The Agage's overarching goal was to instill the qualities deemed essential for a Spartan warrior, which were strength, endurance, and solidarity. Despite its harshness, including brutal contests and a meager diet to foster toughness and resourcefulness, the system was integral to maintaining Sparta's social order and military excellence. It wasn't just about creating soldiers, it was about crafting citizens deeply committed to their polis, ready to sacrifice everything for Sparta's glory and survival. This training program, while fostering an unmatched military prowess acknowledged even by other Greek states, also reflected and reinforced Spartan values and societal norms. Basically, the Agage was a crucible, ensuring the Spartan warriors would not only excel on the battlefield, but also embody the ideals that made Sparta unique among the city-states of ancient Greece. Ancient Sumerian marriage rituals. The ancient Sumerians had a strong connection between their spiritual beliefs and their everyday activities. This is especially clear in their wedding ceremonies, particularly the sacred union known as the Hieros Gamos. This ceremony wasn't just a union between two people, but a reenactment of the divine marriage between the gods, typically Inanna, the goddess of fertility and sexual love, and Dumuzi, her consort. This ritual is believed to ensure fertility and prosperity for the land and its people. A king would marry a priestess embodying Dumuzi and Inanna respectively in a ceremony that included elaborate preparations such as bathing, perfuming, and adorning the priestesses, followed by a procession, gift exchanges, and finally, the sexual union on a ceremonial bed. This act was not merely a physical union, but a deeply spiritual event meant to invoke the divine blessings of fertility on the crops and the community. The Sumerians basically had the belief that love and passion celebrated through these sacred unions were essential for fertility. The role of sacred prostitution within this context also merits some attention. Temple priestesses engaged in ritual sex with male visitors as a form of sacred sexuality, believed to channel divine energy to promote fertility and well-being. This practice, known as sacred prostitution, was rooted in the belief that sexual union could bring humans closer to the divine. Thesmophoria. The Thesmophoria was a big celebration in ancient Greece, honoring Demeter and Persephone and celebrating fertility in both farming and human life. It was one of the few times when married women could actively participate in the public and religious life of their communities. The festival basically lasted 3 days in the fall, which was a time of planting seeds. Many rituals were performed during this period to ensure that the land and the people could be fertile. One of the main rituals involved sacrificing piglets. The remains of the piglets were then buried and then dug up later, and it was believed that mixing them with seeds would help crops grow better. The rituals also included offering pine branches and cakes, shaped like snakes and men. These symbols represented the strong connection between the rituals and the hope of good agricultural harvests. The last day of the festival was instead focused on women's fertility. Crude jokes among women were part of the Thesmorphia festival, which represented a lighter side of Demeter and showed the festival's connection to female sexuality and fertility. They also highlighted the blend of the sacred and the profane in ancient Greek religious practices. Bog bodies. Bog bodies are fascinating and mysterious finds from the peat bogs of northern and western Europe, with some also found in other areas. These preserved human remains give us a unique glimpse into the past, teaching us about the lives, deaths, and cultures of ancient societies. The bodies are kept in such great condition because the bogs basically have no air, are acidic, and contain tannins, which basically mummify them and stop them from decomposing. The best preserved bodies are found in raised bogs, where the low temperatures, high acidity, and lack of oxygen create optimal preservation conditions. The oldest bog body ever found, known as Koljeberg Man from Denmark, dates back all the way to 8000 BCE, showing that people have been interacting with these landscapes for a very long time. Many of the bog bodies come from the Iron Age though, and show signs of being victims of ritual sacrifices or executions. They often have violent marks on their body like cut throats, severed limbs, or ropes around their necks. These bodies are more than just preserved remains. They give us insights into the norms, rituals, and possibly even the legal practices of ancient communities. The fact that objects like bog butter have been found alongside the bodies suggests that bogs were seen as special or sacred places used for preservation and ritualistic offerings. However, there's still many mysteries surrounding these bog bodies. Archaeologists and historians are still speculating about why they were placed in bogs, whether it was for ritual sacrifices, punishments, or something else entirely. As people cut peat less often and work to protect bog environments, new bog bodies and the secrets they hold may become rarer to find, making each discovery even more valuable for understanding our ancient past. Pharaoh's Hebsed Festival in Egypt. The Hebsed Festival in ancient Egypt was essentially a big party that happened every 30 years to celebrate a pharaoh's rule and show that he's still strong and worthy of being king. It involved lots of special events and rituals to make sure the pharaoh remained powerful and kept the gods happy. One important part of the festival was a race that the pharaoh had to run to prove he was physically fit and able to keep ruling. This race wasn't just about showing off his strength, it was also a way of saying that the pharaoh had the right to be king and was connected to the gods. The festival also included giving presents to the gods, putting on special crowns that represented different parts of Egypt, and having a big parade to show that the pharaoh had both heavenly and earthly power. There's pictures and drawings out there that show what the Hebsed festival was like, and they help us understand why it was so important. Some pharaohs like Amenhotep III and Ramses II celebrated their first Hebsed in a really fancy and extravagant way because their rule was going well and the country was rich. Other pharaohs like Hatshepsut and Akhenaten did things a bit differently to show their own unique styles. Hatshepsut had her own Sed festival where she counted the time she was married to her husband, and Akhenaten made changes to the traditional religious practices early on in his rule. Alright, moving on to tier 3 now, Mithraic Mysteries. The Mithraic Mysteries, also known as Mithraism, was a secretive and intriguing cult that was popular in the Roman Empire from the 1st to the 4th century CE. It was especially popular among the Imperial Roman army. This cult basically worshipped Mithras, a god who was inspired by the Iranian worship of the Zoroastrian god Mithra. However, Mithraism developed its own unique rituals and symbols, different from its Persian roots. Mithraism had a complex initiation system with 7 different levels, each with its own unique roles and rituals. These initiations often involved bravery tests and were held in underground temples called Mithraea, which were impressive buildings symbolizing the universe and the beliefs of the cult. The main symbol of Mithraism was an image of Mithras killing a bull, which had deep symbolic meaning and was always present in the worship places. To get on the aspect of rituals of Mithraism though, it involved communal meals that imitated the feast shared between Mithras and the sun god Sol. Despite being popular and influential in the Roman military and society, Mithraism eventually faced persecution from Christians and was suppressed by the end of the 4th century when Christianity became the dominant region in the Roman Empire. There's ongoing debate about the origins of Mithraism, with some theories suggesting it was a direct continuation of Persian Mithra worship, while others suggest it was a unique Roman creation inspired by Iranian elements. Eleusinian Mysteries. The Eleusinian Mysteries were the most revered secret rites in ancient Greece, centered around the goddess Demeter and Persephone. These mysteries played a crucial role in the spiritual lives of the ancient Greeks, offering initiates a profound experience that promised insights into life after death and the cycle of nature. The festival, celebrated primarily at Eleusis near Athens, involved significant preparation and included rites of passage that symbolized death and rebirth, reflecting the agricultural cycle and the myth of Persephone's return from the underworld. Central to the Eleusinian Mysteries was the story of Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, searching for her daughter Persephone, who was abducted by Hades. This story encapsulated themes of loss and reunion, which were ritually enacted through the mysteries. Initiates underwent a series of rites, including fasting and drinking a special barley and mint drink called kaikyan, possibly infused with psychotropic substances to enhance the transformative experience of the rituals. The culmination of the ceremonies took place in a telestron, where initiates participated in or witnessed reenactments of the Persephone myth, leading to a personal and communal epiphany about the cycles of life and the promise of renewal. The Lucian mysteries had a strong influence on how participants viewed death and rebirth, which can be seen in the writings of notable figures like Plato and Plutarch, who were initiates themselves. The festivals also had social impact, promoting unity and continuity through its universal themes and the participation of its community. Unfortunately though, in the 4th century CE, with the spread of Christianity, the Lucian mysteries and other pagan rites were looked at with suspicion and eventually banned. Saturnalia. Saturnalia was a major festival in ancient Rome that honored the god Saturn, who represented agriculture, time, and renewal. Originally observed on December 17th, the festivities lasted for 7 days and were similar to the Greek Chronia festival, highlighting a mythical time of peace and abundance. During Saturnalia, societal norms were reversed, allowing slaves to experience temporary freedom and a king of misrule to disrupt household hierarchy. The festival is known for its joyful atmosphere, merry celebrations, and the act of giving gifts, which is really similar to Christmas. The festivities began with sacrificial offerings at the Temple of Saturn, followed by a public feast where Saturn was symbolically invited to join, representing the god's liberation and the overall sense of freedom during the celebrations. The tradition of selecting a king of misrule and treating slaves as equals evoked an ideal past without social hierarchy or slavery, capturing the essence of the Golden Age. As Christianity spread though, Saturnalia's traditions and timing influenced the observance of Christmas and the New Year. And despite attempts by individuals like Augustus to shorten the festival and early Christians to suppress its pagan practices, the spirit of Saturnalia endured, shaping and influencing festive traditions throughout the Christian era of the Roman Empire. Cannibalistic rituals of the Caribs. The Caribs were once very powerful in the Caribbean, and their history is both interesting and complicated, especially when it comes to stories of cannibalism that have been associated with them for a long time. These stories have made the Caribs seem really scary, portraying them as warriors who ate their enemies. While this portrayal is actually debated, it's certainly added to the mystery of their culture. However, recent studies and research by experts suggest that the extent of cannibalistic practices among the Caribs might have been exaggerated or misunderstood by early European explorers. These misunderstandings could have come from misinterpreting Carib cultural practices or might have been used to justify European colonization in the Caribbean. In reality though, the Caribs' way of life and rituals were probably more complex, involving social, spiritual, and survival strategies that went beyond the exaggerated accounts of cannibalism. Zoroastrian Tower of Silence rituals. The Zoroastrian Tower of Silence is a part of Zoroastrian funeral traditions. It involves placing the deceased on raised structures called dakmas, where they're exposed to the elements and birds. This ritual is rooted in the belief that decaying matter should not contaminate the sacred elements of earth, air, fire, and water. The towers, mainly found in Iran and India, have circles for the bodies of men, women, and children to be consumed by vultures. This process is seen as a way to purify the remains before collecting the bones and disposing of them in a manner that preserves the purity of the elements. While this practice was pretty popular back then, it faces challenges in modern times, like the decline in vulture populations. As a result, some communities have had to adapt the rituals. The Oracle of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi was a very important place in ancient times. It was located on Mount Parnassus and was considered the most prestigious center for prophecy in the ancient world. Some people believe that the Oracle of Delphi was connected to the god Apollo, and Pythia, a priestess, would receive messages from Apollo and give them to visitors. People from all walks of life would come to seek the oracle's advice and guidance on different matters. They wanted to know their destinies or gain favor from the gods. Delphi was essentially seen as the center of the world too, and this was represented by the Omphalos stone. The oracle's prophecies were also kind of hard to understand and required careful interpretation. About the ritual aspect, the process of consulting the oracle was very detailed and involved purification rituals and making sacrifices. This showed how important and serious it was to communicate with the divine. The Pythia would basically sit on a tripod and enter a trance-like state to deliver the prophecies. These prophecies would then have a big impact on important decisions, both in politics and in people's personal lives. Despite its religious significance though, Delphi was also a place of cultural and political influence. It hosted the Pythian Games and was a neutral place where city-states could meet and discuss. Christianity's rise caused the decline of Delphi, and the oracle eventually stopped giving prophecies in the 4th century CE. Tier 4. Skylight Rituals in Wicca. Skylight rituals in Wicca involve participants performing ceremonies without clothing. I couldn't really find pictures on this, but this tradition stems from the belief that being in a natural state helps achieve spiritual purity and liberation. Gerald Gardner, who's the founder of modern Wicca, may have been influenced by the idea of ritual nudity mentioned in the historical text Aradia or the Gospel of Witches. Doreen Valente, a well-known figure in Wicca, also recognized Gardner's use of this material and incorporated it into Wiccan rituals. However, not all Wiccan traditions require skylight rituals. Some people choose to practice them to challenge societal taboos surrounding nudity, to connect with the divine, or to enhance magical energy. The decision to practice skylight or not is up to the individual, and some covens and solitary practitioners prefer to wear robes or regular clothes during rituals. The practice of skylight rituals varies within the pagan and Wiccan communities too, and depends on the specific tradition. Gardnerian Wicca, for example, emphasizes a strong connection with nature and the rejection of societal norms, so they often include skylight rituals. However, other traditions like Alexandrian Wicca and Sikh's Wicca may also incorporate skylight rituals, but with different focuses and interpretations. Celtic Imbolc Festival. The Celtic Imbolc Festival, which happens on February 1st, marks the start of spring according to the ancient Celtic calendar. It's a celebration of Brigid, who went from being a fertility goddess to one of the most respected saints in Christianity. This festival has both spiritual and agricultural means, symbolizing purification and the awakening of the land. The Celts would basically light fires to represent the return of light and warmth, and each family would keep their hearth fire going all through the night as a way to welcome the sun's return. This practice was not only meant for warmth, but also to predict the weather and how well the upcoming growing season would be. Interestingly, bad weather during Imbolc was seen as a good sign, as it meant a prosperous summer was on the way. This belief came from the myth of the Cailleach, a figure who would gather firewood on dry days to prolong winter. So a wet and windy Imbolc indicated that the winter would end soon. Also, as Christianity became more prominent, Imbolc became integrated into St. Brigid's Day, while still keeping the main elements of fire, purification, and the arrival of spring. St. Brigid's crosses, made from rushes, became symbols of protection against harm, connecting back to the goddess Brigid's association with the hearth and home. Holy wells played an important role too during Imbolc, where rituals were performed to ensure good health and ward off evil. These wells were associated with both the goddess and St. Brigid, and people would make offerings and say prayers there. This tradition still continues too, showing how deeply rooted the festival is in connecting the community and the spiritual and natural world. Ancient Hawaiian Makahiki Festival. The Makahiki Festival, which means year in ancient Hawaii, was a vibrant period marking the Hawaiian New Year, dedicated to Lono, the god of fertility, agriculture, rain, and peace. This celebration began with the rise of the Pleiades constellation and spanned 4 months, a time when warfare was prohibited, and the focus instead shifted to rest, sports, dancing, feasting, and religious activities. Each island had its unique observance methods too, though written records primarily come from the Hawaiian island. The tradition, which saw a decline with the advent of Western ideologies, experienced a revival in the 1980s, thanks to the native Hawaiian culture Renaissance movement, and continues to be celebrated today. Makahiki basically involves significant cultural practices, like the connection of ho'okupuku, which were offerings which served as a spiritual cleansing and a form of tax during King Kamehameha I's time. Offerings included prime pigs, taro, sweet potatoes, feathers, woven mats, and bark cloth, showcasing the community's agricultural wealth and craftsmanship. These were distributed among the ruling chiefs, priests, and favorites, highlighting a structured system of tribute that enforced social and spiritual hierarchies. The festival also featured traditional games such as Hawaiian bowling with ulu maika stones, boxing, wrestling, javelin throwing, and more, promoting physical strength, camaraderie, and honoring the god of sports, which was Akua Pa'ani. These activities reflected the community's values of sportsmanship, strategy, and skill, fostering a sense of unity and celebration among participants. Dionysian Mysteries. The Dionysian Mysteries, which were connected to Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and fertility, were ancient rituals that celebrated liberation from societal norms and a return to a more natural and primal state. These mysteries involved trance-inducing substances, possibly including early forms of wine, mixed with psychoactive ingredients like opium from poppies, and rituals aimed at invoking the spirit of Dionysus, leading participants into ecstatic states through dance and music. The essence of these ceremonies was to dissolve inhibitions, allowing followers to merge with the divine and experience a profound sense of euphoria and oneness with nature. These rites were symbolic of life's cyclical nature, reflecting themes of death and the human psyche's untamed aspects. The inclusion of animals like bulls and goats in the rituals showed the cult's connection to fertility and the agricultural cycle, with these animals serving both practical roles in winemaking and symbolic roles in the cult's mythology. The Dionysian mysteries offered a space where societal outcasts, including women, could find a degree of freedom and expression, challenging the rigid hierarchies of the time. The significance of the Dionysian mysteries extend beyond the historical context, influencing modern views on the therapeutic and transformative potential of altered states of consciousness. They remind us of the enduring human desire to transcend the everyday and touch the divine, whether through art, music, dance, or the sacred act of ritual. Dogon Sigwe Ceremony. The Sigi ceremony, observed by the Dogon people of Mali, is a cultural and religious event that occurs every 60 years, aligning with the astronomical cycle of the star Sirius. This ceremony serves as a generational rite of passage, marking the transfer of wisdom and the secrets of the cult from one generation to the next. It's basically a period where the entire Dogon community comes together in a series of feasts, ceremonies, and festivals, starting in the northeastern part of the Dogon territory and moving through each village in turn. Each village celebrates the Sigi for about a year before passing it on to the next. The celebration involves the creation and dedication of new masks to the ancestors, reflecting the deep ancestral veneration in Dogon culture. The Sigi ceremony is connected to the Dogon's funeral traditions, which happens in two parts, being right after someone dies and later on, maybe years later. These rituals, especially the second part called the Dhamma, are meant to guide the souls of the deceased to their final resting places through dances and spiritual rites. The Dhamma, which has become less common because of the costs involved, is still an important event for tourists interested in the Dogon culture, with traditional masks and statues playing a significant role. Agriculture and working together as a community are extremely important too in Dogon life, especially during the Sigi. The Dogon people farm crops like millet and sorghum together on shared fields, using techniques that prevent soil erosion and support sustainable farming. This communal effort shows the strong connection the Dogon have to the land and their dependence on the agricultural seasons. Siberian shamanistic practices. Siberian shamanism offers a captivating look into the spiritual customs deeply ingrained in Northeastern Asia, especially in Siberia. Some researchers consider Siberia to be the heartland of shamanism, as its diverse ethnic groups have kept shamanistic traditions still alive to this day. These traditions involved a variety of rituals and beliefs centered around shamans' interactions with the spiritual world. They encompass healing, purification, and guiding souls, often achieved through ecstatic trance states induced by drums, dancing, and occasionally substances like the mukomor mushrooms. Shamanism in Siberia is defined by its core belief in a world filled with spirit, where the shaman acts as a middleman between the human and the spiritual realms. Using rituals that may mimic natural sounds or involve distinct shamanic attire and drums symbolizing the universe, shamans establish a complex connection with the spirit world to assist their communities. These practices serve not only spiritual purposes but also practical ones, such as healing illnesses believed to be caused by malevolent spirits or guiding the deceased to the afterlife. Sacred locations, particularly Lake Baikal and its surrounding areas, also play a vital role in shamanic rituals, serving as traditional spaces for ceremonies and offerings to spirits. There's even been a revival of traditions like the Jordan Games and the Call of the 13 Shamans, which showed the significance of shamanism still in Siberia. These events draw participants from all over the world and reinforce the cultural heritage of Siberian shamanistic practices. Orphic Mysteries. The Orphic Mysteries were a secretive and profound aspect of ancient Greek religion. They were centered around Orpheus, a legendary figure, and originated around the 6th century BCE. They provided an alternate spiritual path for initiates, which emphasized personal salvation, the immortality of the soul, and the prospect of an afterlife. The Orphics had beliefs that basically differed from mainstream Greek religion, such as reincarnation and the idea that the soul goes through various lives to achieve purification and liberation. A key part of their teachings was the myth of Dionysus Zagreus, who was dismembered by the Titans and then reborn, symbolizing the cycle of death and rebirth for the soul. These teachings were documented in sacred texts and hymns that guided followers on how to live in order to secure a favorable fate in the afterlife. The Orphics also performed specific rituals and followed strict dietary rules to align themselves with their spiritual goals. They believed in divine justice, with the notion that the soul could be judged in the afterlife, receiving rewards or punishments based on its actions on earth. This belief system encouraged a moral and contemplative lifestyle, setting the Orphic path apart as an ethically profound pursuit within Greek religion. Although Christianity eventually overshadowed the Orphic mysteries, their influence endured. They contribute to later religions and philosophical thought in the Western tradition. The emphasis on the destiny of the soul and the personal transformation and knowledge still resonates today, demonstrating the lasting appeal of Orphic spirituality. Australian Aboriginal initiation rites. The initiation and mourning rites of passage in Australian Aboriginal cultures mark important transitions in people's lives. These ceremonies are meaningful and are different for each Aboriginal group, and are important for personal and social identity as well as keeping the community together. One notable example I wanted to add is the Alkirakuma ceremony of the Aranda tribe, where a boy around 12 years old goes through his First Nation rite to become an adult. This ceremony, along with others like the ceremony of circumcision and the Para ceremony of sub-incision, involve physical changes to the body to show that the person is ready for adult responsibilities in the tribe. Another important ceremony is the Kuntamara ceremony, where the sub-incision is reopened to strengthen family bonds in the Waramunga tribe. The Natagura or fire ceremony involves initiates going through challenges by fire to show that they are ready to become men. There's even a tooth knocking ceremony out there which is linked to a rain totem of the Aranda tribe and is an optional ceremony that shows a deeper connection to the tribe's spiritual life and beliefs. And there's even mourning ceremonies like the Kulangara ceremony, which involve physical expressions of sadness and loss, showing how the community mourns together. Pacific Islander Kava ceremony. The Kava ceremony is a significant tradition that has been practiced in the South Pacific for over 4,000 years. It plays a central role in the social and spiritual life of Pacific Island communities, being used for important events like the installation of chiefs, as well as personal milestones like weddings and funerals. The ceremony promotes unity, respect, and hospitality to the consumption of kava, a drink made from the root of the piper plant, which has calming effects. The preparation of kava involves the participation of the community and is served in a wooden bowl called a tanua in coconut shell cups known as bilos. The order in which people drink the kava follows a strict hierarchy, symbolizing peace and unity within the community. Also, each Pacific island has its own unique way of conducting the kava ceremony. For example, in Fiji, the ceremony called sevu sevu is held at important community gatherings, and the kava drink is prepared fresh at the start of the event. The chief is usually the first to drink, followed by the guests, as a way of welcoming newcomers into the community. In Vanuatu, kava bars known as nakamas are popular places for enjoying kava, where both traditional and modern preparation methods are used. In Tonga even, kava is traditionally consumed only by men, often in club meetings or social gatherings, emphasizing different social norms and gender roles within the kava culture. Also, a famous one in Hawaii, kava culture, known as awa, is integrated into various aspects of life and involves the participation of both men and women. Despite concerns about the long-term health effects of kava, which led to temporary bans in some countries, its cultural significance and the role it plays in fostering community relationships still remain undiminished, and the long-term effects, it's basically like the kidney problems that come from it. Moving on to Tier 5. Basque Witches' Sabbats. Basque Witches' Sabbats, also known as Akalare, were gatherings where witches would come together and perform rituals. These events, which took place at night, became the target of witch hunts during the 17th century in the Basque region. The term Akalare refers to the field of the Higo, and it symbolized the association of these gatherings with dark and malevolent forces. The witch trials in Zagaramurdi, a village in the Basque country, exemplifies this dark period, as the Spanish Inquisition persecuted many individuals, particularly women, in its efforts to eradicate witchcraft. These trials were fueled by fear and superstition, leading to torture and executions. However, the impact of the Akalare and witch trials can still be seen today, influencing cultural expressions and artworks like Francisco Goya's Witches' Sabbath. Modern interpretations and studies also provide a more nuanced understanding of these events, recognizing them as part of the rich Basque cultural heritage and spiritual traditions. Tibetan Sky Burials. Sky burials, also known as celestial burials, are a traditional funeral practice in Tibet and hold great religious significance. They represent the Tibetan Buddhist belief in the temporary nature of life and the need to return the body to the natural world. During this ceremony, the deceased person's body is taken to a high location and given to vultures, just like an entry we talked about before. It's believed that these birds will carry the person's soul to heaven, ensuring their spiritual journey is complete. This ritual isn't considered morbid or disrespectful, but rather as an act of compassion and generosity, as it provides nourishment for the birds and aids the deceased person's transition to the afterlife. The process is carried out by a burial master, who dismembers the body so that it can be consumed by the vultures, ensuring that no part goes to waste and each component serves a purpose in the cycle of life. This practice values the natural environment and demonstrates a deep respect for all living creatures and emphasizes the interconnectedness of all living beings. Historically though, sky burials remain largely unknown to the outside world because of the sacred and private nature of the ceremony. However, with growing interest in Tibetan culture and traditions, there's been more information and discussion surrounding this unique practice. Nevertheless, the ceremonies primarily remain closed to outsiders in order to preserve their integrity and sacredness. Incan Kapak Hucha. The Incas had a ritual called Kapak Hucha where they sacrificed children. This ritual was very important to them and was done with great respect. They believed that by sacrificing the purest children, they could please the gods and ensure good things for their community, like prosperity, health, and good weather. The children chosen for sacrifice were often from noble families or picked for their beauty and good health, symbolizing purity and innocence. These children would travel across the Inca Empire, taking part in ceremonies at sacred places before reaching the final spot where the sacrifice would happen. The chosen sites were usually high mountain peaks because they were considered closer to the gods. The Kapahucha ceremony was done for different reasons too, like marking important events, dealing with famine or disasters, or celebrating a new ruler. They believed that sacrificing the children would make sure the sun kept moving across the sky, bring rain, and keep everything in balance. This ritual showed how the Incas saw their gods, the natural world, and life and death. It showed their devotion and their willingness to give up what was dearest to them for the well-being of their people and to please the gods. In recent years, archaeologists have found mummified remains on mountains that give us more details about the Kapahucha, like how the children were prepared for sacrifice and the objects that were buried with them. These discoveries have helped us understand more about the Kapahucha and its importance in Inca religious and cultural practices. African Dogon twin rituals. So another one that comes from the Dogon people in Mali, they placed a special importance on rituals involving twins. When twins are born in the Dogon community, it's seen as a lucky and prosperous event. This belief comes from the Dogon creation myth, which tells the story of a universe starting with a pair of twins. The Dogon performs various rituals to honor twins because they see them as a connection to the cosmic balance and harmony. These rituals are not only a celebration of the twins' birth, but also a way to communicate with the spirits of their ancestors who were also twins. Through these ceremonies, the Dogon people show their connection to the earth, the spiritual world, and the principles that govern the universe. The twin rituals serve many purposes, including strengthening bonds within the community, maintaining balance between the physical and spiritual worlds, and ensuring the well-being of the twins who have special spiritual significance. The rituals involve everyone in the community too, as families and friends come together to celebrate and show respect to the twins and their ancestors. Papua New Guinean Fire Dance. The Baining Fire Dance is a traditional ceremony that has been passed down for generations among the Bainang people of East New Britain Province in Papua New Guinea. It's a deeply spiritual event that showcases the cultural heritage of the region, and the dance is performed during special occasions, like male initiation ceremonies, and used to be exclusively for men. The ceremony takes place at night and involves dancers wearing large masks made of natural materials. These masks represent different spirits and are highly detailed. The dance is not only a show of bravery and skill, but also a ritual that symbolizes purification and renewal. It marks the transition of young men into adulthood and emphasizes the community's connection to the spiritual world. The fire itself is basically seen as a transformative element that can purify and renew the spirit. As the dancers move and jump around the fire, they believe they're communicating with the spiritual realm and seeking protection and blessings for the community. Chaco Canyon Rituals. Chaco Canyon, which is now located in New Mexico, was once home to a civilization called the Ancestor Pueblans. They thrived from the 9th to 12th century CE and were known for their impressive public buildings and unique architecture. The Chacoans also had a great understanding of the natural world, shown through their road network, advanced engineering, and alignment with celestial events. Rituals were also a very big part of their community, with ceremonies and gatherings likely taking place during important celestial events like solstices and equinoxes. They built special underground rooms called kivas for these rituals, which were used for religious ceremonies, community gatherings, and political meetings. The layout of these buildings and their alignment with celestial bodies showed the Chacoans' beliefs and how they integrated their architecture with the natural cycles. Also, the consumption of chocolate, especially during ceremonies, suggests that the Chacoans were part of a larger cultural and religious world beyond their immediate region. The reason for the abandonment of Chaco Canyon in the 12th century is still uncertain though, but theories include changes in the environment, depletion of resources, and social unrest. Today, the National Historical Park of Chaco culture preserves this ancient site and provides insights into the lives of the ancestral Pueblans and their complex society. Sogdian funeral rites. The Sogdians, an ancient Iranian people who thrived in Central Asia, particularly in the area now known as Uzbekistan from the 6th century BC to the 12th century AD, had a rich and complex culture with their funeral rites reflecting their beliefs, cosmology, and social structures. Sogdian funeral practices were also very elaborate, designed to honor the deceased and ensure their safe passage to the afterlife. Also, a key aspect of Sogdian funeral practices is highlighted by the burial rites discovered at sites like Panjikent. These rites include mourning scenes depicted in murals, which suggest a deep reverence for the dead and elaborate ceremonies surrounding death. The murals often depict a communal grieving process, with both mortals and gods participating in the mourning, indicating the importance of the deceased within the community and the cosmos. The Sogdians also integrated some cultural elements from different regions like China in their burial practices. For instance, the discovery of a stone bed in the Anjia tomb, which combines Sogdian and Chinese cultural elements, shows the cultural exchange between the Sogdians and their neighbors. This exchange influenced not only the material aspects of their burial practices, but also reflects the interconnectedness of the Silk Road cultures. The role of women in Sogdian mourning rituals is also kind of significant, since it's indicated by the presence of female figures in the funeral monuments. These women, possibly representing professional ritual mourners, were integral to the funeral cult, engaging in dancing, singing, and other forms of lamentation. Zuni Shakalo ceremony. The Zuni Shakalo ceremony is a significant and essential part of the Zuni people's spiritual and cultural life. It happens every year during the winter solstice after the harvest. This ceremony consists of a series of dancers and rituals held in a beautiful valley where the Zuni Pueblo is located. It's a time for renewal and celebration, which is rooted in their connection to their ancestral lands in New Mexico. Since 1990, the Shakalo ceremony has been restricted to native Zuni people only though. However, non-native guests may be invited by a Zuni tribal member. This demonstrates the sacredness of the ceremony and the Zuni people's desire to protect its integrity and privacy. During the ceremony, 6 Shakalo members participate. These members are tall figures that represent spirit deities and symbolize the connection between the Zuni people and the universe. Each messenger represents a different cosmic direction, and they carry prayers and blessings. The Shakalo figures, which stand at 10 feet tall, wear wooden frames covered with dance kilts and masks. They basically dance throughout the night, visiting specific houses to bless them. For the Zuni people, this is not only a visually stunning display, but also a deeply spiritual ritual that ensures the well-being of the community and its harmonious relationship with the spiritual world. The ceremony expresses the Zuni people's cultural identity and the respect for traditions passed down through generations. It's also one of the most important events in the Zuni religious calendar, and it's a time for communities to come together, reaffirm their values, beliefs, and connections to their ancestors and the natural world. Bhutanese Black-necked Crane Festival. The Bhutanese Black-necked Crane Festival is a yearly event that shows their deep respect for nature. It takes place on November 11th and coincides with the birthday of the king. The festival celebrates the arrival of the black-necked cranes to this valley for the winter. These cranes are highly revered in the Bhutanese culture and are seen as symbols of longevity and prosperity. People eagerly anticipate their arrival from the Tibetan Plateau each year. The festival basically aims to raise awareness about conserving these endangered species and includes cultural programs, dances, and specifically choreographed crane dances performed by locals. These performances represent Bhutanese cultural identity, spiritual beliefs, and the reverence for the natural world. The Ainu bear worship. Ayomante, also known as Iomante, is a significant Ainu ceremony dedicated to the bear, embodying the spiritual life essence of the Ainu people. This ritual, centered around the sacrifice of a brown bear, is deeply symbolic, representing a spiritual send-off or farewell. In certain Ainu communities, a Blackiston's fish owl may take the place of the bear in this profound ceremony. The term Iomante basically means to send something off or someone off, which represents the ceremony's purpose to honor and return the spirit of the bear to the heavens. In Japanese, it's known as sending off the bear, which translates to komakuri. The Ainu regard the bear not merely as a physical being, but as a sacred entity, which is basically like a kamui, embodying significant spiritual and cultural values. Basically meaning that this ceremony is not just an act of sacrifice, but basically a spiritual communion and a reverent farewell to a being considered to be both divine and kin. The Iomante ritual involves raising a bear cub within the community, treating it with great care and affection until it reaches a certain age, at which point the ceremonial sacrifice takes place. This act is believed to send the bear spirit back to the realm of the kamui ensuring the continued protection and prosperity of the Ainu people. The ceremony is marked by rituals, prayers, and feasts, which show the community's deep respect for the bear and the spiritual significance. The practice of Iomante also shows the Ainu's belief in the interconnectedness of all living things, which is a common theme in a lot of these rituals. Through the ceremony, the Ainu express their respect for the natural world, their ancestors, and the spiritual forces that they believe govern existence. Alright, moving on to tier 6. Venda Python Dance. The Damba or Python dance is a part of the Venda culture where water plays a significant thematic role. The Venda people hold sacred belief that the rivers and lakes are sanctified places and that the Python god controls the rains. One of the most revered sites for the Venda is Lake Fundudzi, where the Damba Python dance is held annually. Traditionally performed as a pre-martial initiation ceremony, the Damba is a rite of passage that symbolizes the last day in the life of a Venda girl or boy before entering adulthood. This dance is particularly performed by young women too, marking their transition into womanhood. The dancers basically line up in a single file and emulate the movements of a python, which includes hands on hip formation and the sinuous, fluid movement which all mimics the slithering motion of a snake. The initiation ceremony to the python dance also seeks to awaken the fertility symbolized by the python in every Venda girl, believed to carry within her a tiny version of the creation serpent. This tradition shows the importance of traditional Venda initiation rituals, which plays a really crucial role in their community. Yanomami endocannibalism. The Yanomami people, who live in over 200 to 250 villages spread across the immense Amazon rainforest, have a pretty special tradition when it comes to death, called endocannibalism. This means that they eat the flesh of their deceased relatives, not just within their immediate family, but also within their larger tribe and community. When searching this up on Google, some sensitive pictures come up, so I won't really be adding them here, but basically this ritual is deeply ingrained in Yanomami culture and shows their understanding of death, family, connections, and the afterlife. To them, this practice is more than just a way of honor, but also a way to unite the deceased with the living community and basically strengthen their bonds. The Yanomami people believe that by consuming the ashes of their loved ones, they can keep their spirits alive within the community. Instead of burying the body, they basically transform it into a form that can be taken in by the living. So yeah, basically this practice serves as a reminder of the different ways cultures all over the world approach death and mourning. Oro Festival of the Yoruba. The Oro Festival is an event celebrated by various towns and settlements of Yoruba origin, predominantly in the southwestern parts of Nigeria. It's an annual traditional festival that's also patriarchal since it's exclusively celebrated by male descendants who are paternal natives to specific locations where the event is taking place. The event is dedicated to the worship of the Oro deity, an Orisha in the Yoruba religion, and involves a series of rituals and ceremonies that are deeply rooted in Yoruba culture and spiritual practice. The Oro Festival is basically known by its exclusive nature since it prohibits the participation or presence of women and non-initiates during specific rituals. This restriction is more out of a respect for the sacredness of the ceremony and the belief in the potent spiritual power of the Oro deity. The festival's activities may last for several days too, and during this time it enforces a curfew on the community, especially on women who are required to stay indoors to avoid encountering the Oro and facing severe spiritual consequences. Focusing on the festival's rituals though, they include invocations, offerings, and the veneration of the Oro deity, which is accompanied by traditional music, drumming, and chanting, which facilitate communication with the spiritual realm and invoke the blessings of the Oro. Pueblo Corn Dance. The Pueblo Corn Dance is practiced by different Native American tribes, which is particularly in southwestern United States. It's a part of the Pueblo's people community and spirituality, as it includes prayers for rain, good harvest, and the well-being of the community as a whole. This dance is closely connected to their agricultural cycles and shows their close relationship with the earth and their reliance on corn as a staple food and a sacred part of their beliefs. The corn dance is also celebrated in various Pueblo communities, like Santo Domingo Pueblo, where it attracts many people from New Mexico and other places. The celebration begins with the morning mass in the church, followed by a procession with the statue of their patron saint, which leads into the dance ceremonies. These ceremonies involve complex dance movements, traditional clothes, and music that have deep symbolical meanings. The dancers, often wearing symbols of the natural world, perform precise and rhythmic movements that represent the growth of corn and ask for blessings of rain and fertility from the spiritual realms. And this dance is not only for the Pueblo because it shares a lot of similarities with agriculture and rain ceremonies in indigenous cultures all around the world. And it's worth checking out if any of you guys are interested. Sami Noidi drumming. The Sami people of Northern Europe have a group known as Sami Noidi, they used drums in their spiritual practices, which were really important in their ceremonies. And there were two types of main drums, a bowl drum with a drum head tied over the wooden bowl, and a frame drum where the drum head is stretched over a thin wooden ring. Both types of drums were traditionally made using reindeer hide and played a key role in their rituals, helping them communicate with the spirit world and guide the community through divination, healing, and other ceremonies. It was said that through this drum, the Naudi could enter trance states, travel to other worlds, and interact with spirits to gain knowledge, healing, and guidance for the community. The drum wasn't just an instrument to them, it was seen as a sacred object that represented the essence of the universe and offered answers and solutions to the community's problems. Unfortunately though, the Naudi and Sami shamanistic practices were persecuted and suppressed by Christian missionaries who labeled the Naudi as witches and their rituals as demonic. Despite these challenges, the significance of Naudi drumming for the Sami people still remains strong. Today, there's renewed interest in Sami shamanistic practices, including drum making and decoration. All this is basically part of a larger effort to revive and preserve Sami spiritual traditions. Melanesian cargo cults. Melanesian cargo cults emerged in the early mid-20th century among indigenous Melanesian communities, particularly in response to dramatic changes brought about by the arrival of European colonizers and military personnel during World War II. These movements were characterized by the belief that ritualistic acts and ceremonies can induce the delivery of goods and wealth from their ancestors or other supernatural sources, often conceptualized as coming from the Western world. The term cargo cult itself was basically coined to describe the array of religious movements that arose when traditional Melanesian societies encountered the advanced technologies and vast supplies of material goods brought by Westerners. Observing the wealth and power of the Europeans and Americans and later the Japanese during World War II, the indigenous people formulated religious and ritualistic practices aimed at attracting these valuable resources for themselves and interpreted them as intended for them but intercepted by the foreigners. These cults often center around charismatic leaders who claim to have received divine revelations instructing their followers on specific rituals to bring about the desired delivery of the cargo. Practices that could include the construction of mock airstrips, airplanes, and radio equipment out of local materials, mimicking the action of soldiers or colonial administrators, in the belief that these imitative actions would attract the cargo to their communities. While the specific beliefs and practices varied widely among different groups, common themes were basically a desire to regain autonomy and wealth lost to colonial powers, and a deep-seated belief in the justice of the universe, that the material wealth of the world was intended for sharing among all peoples. Feast of St. Lucy in Scandinavia. The Feast of St. Lucy, which happens on December 13th, is a beloved tradition in Scandinavia. It's a way to honor St. Lucia of Cyprus, who was a martyr in the 3rd century. This day is significant during the Advent season since it represents the bringing of light during the darkest time of the year, both literally and symbolically. This celebration is particularly important in Sweden, Norway, and even parts of Finland. The main figure in the Lucia celebration is basically a young woman who is chosen to represent St. Lucia. She wears a white gown with a red sash and has a crown of candles on her head. This portrayal comes from the legend of Lucia, who used to wear a candlelit wreath to bring food to Christians hiding in the catacombs under the city of Rome. The white dress signifies purity, while the red sash represents Lucia's martyrdom. One of the highlights of the celebration is also the Lucia procession. It involves a group of young girls called Lucia brides, who wear similar white gowns and carry candles. They're then followed by boys in white gowns who sing traditional Lucia and Christmas songs. This procession brings light and warmth to the cold Scandinavian winter, symbolizing hope and the return for longer days. Besides this procession, special foods are also enjoyed during the Feast of St. Lucy. Some of these include saffron buns called lusakatar and ginger snaps known as pepparkakor. It's actually a really big event since schools, workplaces, and communities all come together to observe this tradition. They have early morning processions, singing, and breakfasts featuring these traditional treats. This celebration also goes beyond its Christian origins. It's become a cultural festival that brings communities together to celebrate light, generosity, and the approach of Christmas. Huli Wigmen initiation in Papua New Guinea. The Huli Wigmen are a famous and deeply traditional group from the Hilo province in southern highlands of Papua New Guinea. These headdresses are important for the Huli Wigmen as they participate in various rituals that symbolize the transition from being a teenager to becoming an adult man in their society. It's crucial for the Huli people to maintain their cultural traditions and social unity through these initiation ceremonies. The initiation process for young Huli men involves different stages too, one of which is isolation. During this time, they're separated from the rest of the community and taught about their customs, welfare, hunting, and spiritual practices. These rituals also involve growing their own hair, which will be used to create the unique wigs that the Huli Wigmen are known for. The wigs are made using the initiate's hair, feathers, moss, and other natural materials that represents their connection to the land and their ancestors. These ceremonial wigs are worn during important cultural events such as festivals and rituals that highlight the men's roles within the Huli society. By participating in the creation of these wigs and engaging in these rituals, the Huli wig men reinforce their community's values and strengthen their individual identities within the tribe. So that ends the video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and let me know any feedback you have. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.